What are the creepiest urban legends from your area? This isn't an urban legend, but it might as well be. There is this vending machine in Seattle that is filled with rare and valuable soda cans, many of which are out of production. Nobody knows who stocks the vending machine, and the one time it needed repairs, nobody saw who took it to get repaired. We have a chair that's been untouched since the 1960s in our school's boiler room. The janitor swears that a boy got locked down there by these other kids the day before summer break and died from the heat. He claims that the chair moves and that the door handle moves like he's still there trying to get out. Not my current area, but one of the primary schools I went to had a few trees in the back corner of the field with a mountain of dirt. There were rumors that it was haunted with horses, of all things lol. There was one black horse that was evil. And if you sat under the trees and closed your eyes, you could hear the horses. It wasn't until I was older that I found out the school was built on an old racing ground and it closed down after one of the jockeys poisoned a competitor's black horse. Black shucks. Big, black, ghostly, demonic dogs with glowing red eyes that are supposed to be omens of death. They generally appear on roads at night. There's apparently a few around town and some drag chains too. Also one is actually a bear, but I have no idea why we have a ghostly demonic bear because we don't even have normal bears in this country. I live in Romania and as a kid the most common legend was the black ambulance that would steal kids and harvest their organs, and that kids' bodies were to be found a few days later abandoned on a field with some money for the funeral. Also, in my town our parents would never let us go to the cinema because there was this legend about a man who put AIDS-infected needles on the seats. We have little people, like 6 inches tall, that live in our forests. They stay well hidden unless you're all by yourself and vulnerable. Then they like to mess with you for fun. We have 3 mysterious men in a car called the Guardians, yes that's what we call them, along Montana Highway 464. People have told experiences where they have car trouble and 3 men in a car drive up and help them out. Other people talk about headlights that disappear in places where they shouldn't disappear. We also have a Native American in a jean jacket and jeans who materializes in front of cars before they can swerve out of the way. When the driver checks for a victim, no body is found. There's an abandoned mental asylum near where I used to live. People would of course say it is haunted and dare one another to go there at night. But the weird thing is, it draws people in. If you find yourself driving late at night, you might end up driving on the grounds of the asylum out of nowhere. This happened to me and my mom once. Somehow we got off at the wrong exit, several exits from our normal exit, and wound up on the grounds of the asylum. Shouldn't even be possible. There are gates that are supposed to be closed and locked. I remember my mom and I were freaked out, and for a second I thought I saw faces looking out from the windows of the asylum, lights flickering on and off. We managed to find our way out through the main gate again shortly after. Not really creepy, but there's one house in my hometown that is said to be haunted. There's a tray with a golden teapot on it, and the tray has scratch marks on it. That tray has been sitting in the same location for years, remaining completely untouched, and still, to this day no one has touched it. Some of my friends insist that it's haunted. There's also an urban legend about how an electrician, or someone with a similar job, fell off of a ladder while setting up one of the lights in the middle school gym. His ghost is said to haunt the gym at night whenever the lights are turned off. Rural Western Maryland. Been researching folklore for our class. We have a few, but here's one of my personal best. Legend of the Beansucker. The story of a man who wanted to scare a couple as they were coming home in a carriage, back in the late 1800s. He stuffed his mouth full of beans and jumped in front of their carriage. It was said the driver was angry, so he chased the man down the railroad tracks by the path, until the man, the bean guy, ran into an oncoming train. It was said when they found the body, there was no head. Since then, people say you can hear the beansucker's head rolling around or find beans on the ground. Maybe not the creepiest, but there is evidence that the train part may have happened around that time, which makes the reality factor even more real. There is a large, burial ground, for people who know too much and are a liability, mostly drug rings, out on a part of the reservation that no police or tribal police have jurisdiction to be able to investigate. Unfortunately I heard about, and so did my friends in high school, and we thought it was just a legend. Well, last year I learned it was real. I had a friend who got out the drug ring and showed it to me. Flathead Lake Monster. The Flathead Lake in western Montana is the largest body of fresh water this side of the Great Lakes. 18 miles wide, 26 miles long, 400+ feet deep. People have seen the FLM breach the surface looking like the back of a serpent-type creature. My theory is there are some monstrous 25-foot-long sturgeons hiding out down there, but who knows? There's a small graveyard out the back of Cranebrook that is haunted by the ghost of Sarah Marshall. We and my mates went there one night, didn't see much except we found fingerprints all over the windscreen of the car. We left almost immediately. In San Antonio there's an urban legend of ghost kids leaving handprints on your car if you park near the train track. A school bus collided with a train back in the 1940s or so, and supposedly if you leave flour, powder, you'll see small handprints. There's a place in my county like 10–15 minutes from my house called Bostick Brickyard. Legend goes that it was a slave owner's property and that he killed all of his slaves and dumped them in the swamp there. If you go out to the swamp at night and yell, "Throw something," you hear something being thrown into the water. If you keep yelling, you can hear it get closer. I'm getting chills because I've personally experienced it a few times and it's creepy as fuck. One time, I and a group of like 5 made the mistake of using a Ouija board there and we heard a distant scream. Fucking terrifying. There's also a legend in the same place that a green banshee will chase you out of there, but nothing's happened to me, yet. There's an enormous wooden railroad trestle not too far from me. Tracks are still in use, and the legend goes that one day in the 1940s when the area was super rural, a teenage boy decided to kill himself. As the road passing under the trestle was the only way to access the houses beyond it at that time, he elected to hang himself from the beam directly above the road so his parents would be forced to see him when they returned home. I normally don't believe in this sort of thing, but if you look closely you can still see marks in the timber above the road that look suspicious, like a rope rubbed against it. Draw your own conclusions. Recently on a local Facebook group about my and the neighboring village there have been rumors of a dancing man. Only a couple of people have seen him, but they say he wears an old gas mask and black clothes, and can be found dancing at night on the beach or can be seen walking the hill in a groovy stride. Also he disappears when people look away and then look back. It's me. I am the dancing man. Become a cryptid is part of my bucket list and I can now officially cross it off. Another one is this little church, girls' school that sits not too far off from the Gates of Hell cemetery I mentioned in my other comment. There are a few different rumors about it. The one I was always told was that a nun hanged herself in the open bell tower, and that on certain nights you can see her body swinging still. I've also heard that a nun went crazy and killed some of her students before being stopped. My mother was a wild thing, and her friends actually climbed up and touched the bell as a teenager. Lol. They've actually renovated the interior a few times, once a restaurant and a bed and breakfast, but even after that people there said weird shit would happen, like chairs sliding across the floor, and shadowy figures in the bell tower. Super spooky. I live in a town in California called Martinez. John Muir's house is there and people keep saying it's haunted. I cannot even count those cringy exploring haunted house at 3 a.m. 666 videos that I see on Instagram. In Erie, Angola, there is something called Pigmen. The story is about this farmer who hated to be bothered. These kids every day would go bother him. So to warn the kids he would chop pigs' heads off and put them on sticks and put them in front of his house to warn people off. One day he was extra busy and these kids messed with him. He kidnapped them and cut off their heads one by one, making the other kids watch what was going to happen to them. He put the heads on sticks and put them in front of his house. The real story behind it is the most horrific train accident in Erie, Angola. More than 50 people died. 2 got away. There's more to the story. Look it up if you want to know more. At a site in the woods where a people were supposedly lynched, there is an indention beneath the hanging tree where the people's feet would lightly drag while hanging. People claim that if you fill the hole in and wait overnight, they say that the swinging feet of those lynched will visibly re-drag marks in the sand. It's not really a known creepy urban legend, but in the 1800s in the Owyhee Mountains in Idaho there was a group of hunters staying in a cabin, and after failing to come back to their families a search party was sent out to look for them. They found the cabin, locked from the inside, with the window also locked from the inside. And they found all of the hunters dead with their heads crushed. No one knows who did it or how. But the incident repeated itself in like the 1970s or something. Disclaimer. I don't really remember the story because I haven't heard it since I was younger and English is my second language, so bear with me. So I had this friend who lived across the street from a graveyard, and she had been living there for maybe 10–15 years at that point, and one night around midnight she looked out her window and saw a man hanging and swinging from a tree in the graveyard. She said she saw his face and it was like he was staring back at her. But anyways, the next morning police come take the man and do their thing. Ever since that night she hears knocks on her door and a person walking around her house, and there would be nobody, but every so often she would look out her window and see that man staring back at her. The whole Skinwalker Ranch thing is like 5 miles from my house. No longer my area, but there was a story about a woman who had been murdered on the road I lived on. It was said her ghost still haunted the stretch of road she'd been murdered, and you could see her wandering around still. In fact, it happened right at my driveway. The driveway was a 1/4 mile long and our house sat away from the country road. When my mother heard this story, she laughed. A few years prior, a friend and I were playing with an old Halloween costume and leftover fake blood. I'd dressed in the ghost costume and let my friend dump fake blood on me, and we were at the front of the drive. Aside from my stepfather getting concerned phone calls, we thought the matter was settled. Turns out, I started and starred in my own ghost story. The Huakaipo, also known as the Night Marchers, are the spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors who have been cursed to march the islands for eternity. The Night Marchers are said to march in a single line, often carrying torches and weapons while chanting and playing drums. To protect yourself, you must lie on the ground face down in respect. Otherwise, the Night Marchers will kill you. Or so they say. My hometown growing up as an urban legend about the 7 gates of hell, where if you pass through all 7 you end up in hell. According to one legend, a mental institution was erected in a remote location so as to isolate people deemed insane from the rest of the world. One day in the 1900s, a fire broke out and, due to its remoteness, firefighters could not reach the hospital in time to save it. Many patients died in the flames, while others escaped and were soon beaten to death. Some say that the gates were put up by the local search party to trap the remaining inmates. I'm new to the area, but judging by the homemade posters that keep appearing on every streetlight in the suburb, somebody in the local government eats stray cats. Goatman, he's kinda cute, so I might step out into the woods tonight with some flowers and wine. I've seen an actual skinwalker with my own 2 eyeballs in West Lake Tahoe and Kissimmee, Florida. It was right after Hurricane Irma. This thing looked like as if it was a wolf covered in bare human flesh. Naked as a MF. Standing upright, mind you. I still till this day have no fucking idea what the ever-living shit this thing was. It almost looked like a centaur but no horse's ass. It was on Mackinson's Island in Kissimmee. Me and 4 other friends saw this thing emerge from the palmettos and stared at us for up to 3 minutes. At least 5 y'all. I still dream about it. Come to find out, Mackinson Island was where the Spanish settlers banished the Seminole tribe to. Gives me the fucking willies, bro. In the 1980s, the Killer Clowns in South Phoenix. They shut down the Element School for one day because everyone was too scared to attend. There was even a song. The clowns, the clowns, the clowns are coming for you. You better watch out or the Killer Clowns will kill you too. The Killer Clowns would drive around in a white van or white car and would take kids. I'll have to roughly translate it from Arabic, so bear with me. We call it the caller. It is told that in the middle of the night it calls your name and forces you to follow its voice, until you reach a body of water. It then pulls you under, forcing water into every single hole in your body no matter how small, and of course then drowning you. I think this was made up so kids do go on a swim at night. If anyone is interested, it's originally an Egyptian urban legend. Here's the Arabic name. Well, in my city the cops are known to take natives out of the city in winter and take away their clothes. Look up Starlight Tours. Mary Jane's Bridge. Classic story of a girl being raped and murdered on this particular bridge. A ghostly apparition apparently appears at night, and if you stop your car on the bridge, it won't start again until it's rolled off of the bridge. There are enough believers of it in the area to give me pause, and I've heard some people say they've witnessed it themselves. I worked not too far, just a couple of miles, from that bridge last year, and just being so close to it creeped me out. We have a tree that looks like a woman sitting on a stump. Apparently a young woman sat there and cried until she became a tree. I'm from Vegas, so I guess it's probably all the haunted hotel stories. I once came across this car wreck while hiking and decided to do some research. Found out about a kid named Nicholas Artemo who died in a car wreck the night of his high school graduation in the 1960s. Some old-timers in a local Facebook group say he still walks down the road near Sunol trying to flag cars down. Also, the car wreck I found was probably not his. There is a place near here called the Gates of Hell. That's an old cemetery that teenagers go after dark. There is all sorts of rumors. Some take the name literally, some report weird sightings and spookiness. Some people even say the clan meets there periodically. I've been there a couple of times and the scariest part has always been the tiny-ass road that leads out to it. You'll have to back up if someone is coming the other way, and it's all trespassing since it's private property. The Kushtaka, a shape-shifting creature that mainly takes the form of an otter and targets children by luring them into the water. The Witch's Grave. Wife of a local minister died on Halloween. They buried her with 4 white posts around her grave. But when they came back the next day, all the posts were black, as they are to this day, proving she was a witch. You go inside those 4 posts, and something bad will happen to you. Knew a guy who on a lark brought a Ouija board in there, and 2 weeks later died in a car accident. So when I was a kid, my cousin told me about this story she heard from a friend about a weird ice cream truck and the guy would put pills in the ice cream and pick kids up off the street. Chicago was built on top of a cemetery. When I lived in Vacaville, CA in the late 90s, the Zodiac Killer was still freaking people out, and there was a place near Lake Berryessa that supposedly had some connection to one of the murders but nobody really knew how or what happened or even usually where it was. Wikipedia wasn't on phones yet. So driving to the Zodiac Shack was mostly underage drinking, drug use and trying to scare each other. I grew up in southern Utah near the Four Corners. In other words, Skinwalker country. I have lots of creepy stories about them, both from my own experiences and the experiences of others, but chances are a lot of you guys wouldn't believe and they probably belong to a different subreddit. However, the creepiest thing about them is that everyone, and I mean everyone, is scared of them. Most of the people in my town are farmers and overall pretty pragmatic people who aren't white K to believe or make up ghost stories. And yet, whenever I would ask an adult, what are skinwalkers, growing up, the answer I always got was a very serious, we don't talk about skinwalkers. Whether you believe in them or not, you have to admit that the ubiquity of that attitude in my hometown is pretty weird. Water babies, Lake Pyramid, Paiute Indian Reservation. Anyone who does hallucinogenics out there have terrible experiences and the natives don't like to talking anything about them, though it's very common folklore. I think it has more to do with steep cliff drop-offs in the lake out of nowhere even though you can walk out in it for miles, and swarms or tarantulas that cover entire hillsides and unreal amounts Mormon crickets plague like numbers. Maryland here. Ghost sighting at Point Lookout Lighthouse. Supposedly ghosts of Confederate soldiers wander around at night. In Fells Point, there is local ghost tours and the claim is the ghost of William Fell roams the streets at night. Snowbirds, shivers. North Carolina, the Devil's Trampling Grounds, there's a patch in an opening in a forest just off a highway where nothing has grown for a long-ass time and some people hear yelling and devilish screams coming from those woods. Ironically, it is a very popular spot to camp, which likely explains the noise. There's an Australian urban legend that says Scott Morrison, our current reigning Prime Minister, shat his pants at the Engadine McDonald's in 1997 after the Cronulla Sharks lost the grand final. If that mental image doesn't shiver your timbers, then I don't know what would. Don't walk out into the mud flats because at one point in time a man did that, had to be rescued by a helicopter and was torn in half. Another one: if you're lost in the woods and you hear music, don't follow it. It's the little people playing tricks to kidnap you. Apologies to anyone with short stature, dwarfism, I'm going off of my native culture's term here.